Hello, my name's Liz Cowans, and I'm going to talk today about a street through Tyne. Our area is going to be the lower Ouseburn Valley, and it's in Newcastle upon Tyne, and it's Stepney Street down to Stepney Bank. The aims of our presentation are to help and inspire you to get out into the field as long as you can in order to do research for your inquiry. And my sections, possibly historical, to give a background to what John Smith's going to do later on. The Ouseburn Valley is in Newcastle upon Tyne, but anything that we're really talking about is going to be possible that you could apply it to whether you're in Sheffield, whether you're in St Austell, whether you're in Rochdale in Lancashire. Ideas where you can use information and you can use your skills to collect information to create your personal inquiry. So hopefully it might give you a few ideas. There's lots of material that's available for download on the website for the GA, and if you want to use those, then please feel free. Our street through Tyne is going to be an urban transect, and it's to look at the way in which the street in the Ouseburn has changed with time and how it's been changed by events, whether it's in industry or in social development, whether it's something which happened on the river, whether it's something happened in the region or in Britain as a whole. So we're going to be using the urban transect, and we're going to talk about what that is later on. In other words, we're looking at our street as it's changed. If you locate your street or you locate your area, there are lots of areas where you can in fact get information. Google Earth's an excellent one. You can locate your street, you can locate your area, and it can give you an outline of where these things are in a modern context. So we're starting looking at this area in the current day, in the present day. Newcastle upon Tyne is based on a river. You can see it at the bottom, where the River Tyne is. The city centre is here, urban motorway. But also you've got areas which developed almost along a river here, which is the Ouseburn, which starts in Northumberland. A map like this will give you all sorts of different areas and different buildings, but we're really concerned about this area here. Our street's located here. And you can identify it as you zoom in, 7 stories, areas or buildings which are of importance. What I will draw your attention to is that when you got in a city and you got industrial development, you tended to get areas of terraced housing. But you don't get that down here, and there are all sorts of reasons, which we'll look at in a minute, why you don't get terraced housing here. Partially it's lack of space. Aerial views are really quite interesting because they relate to what happened. There are certain shapes that you can work out. So our transect starts at the top of Stepney Bank here, and the Tanner's Arms, which has been there, it's a pub for a long, long time, and we would walk down past all the buildings down to where you have a bridge and down and round to get to the river. And there it is. There's our urban transect. Quite nice. Going down's all right, coming back's really steep in parts, which makes you think when it was developing industrially, the roads were narrow and you were talking about horses and carts, which would have been during winter months difficult to get up and even more difficult to get down. The bit at the bottom, which is down here, is an area which was important for transport because you got wherries or small boats coming up bringing materials, and this is the top of the tidal range, and you've got the boats coming in with the tide and going out with the tide. But our section, this section here, was mainly horse traffic with carts. It's not just Google Earth that you can get information from. You can get information from the Ordnance Survey as well. They have nice maps that you can zoom into. Block maps, which shows where our area is here in comparison to the area where you've got your terraces, City Stadium, and where you've got Miller's Hill, and you've got the mouth of the river here leading into the Tyne. As you zoom in, and if you needed, for example, a modern map where you have buildings outlined, then this is a possibility that you could use here. You could always ask your local council to see whether they had an outline map, and that outline map would have been easy to just use and chip down so that you can annotate, colour in, investigate what the different buildings are now. If you notice on this map, there is a slipway, and that's where you would again have crossed the river. Ordnance Survey's got lots of different overlays. And if you notice, when I use anything like this, to give reference and to say where it came from is a nice style. You would say, I got this from, because remember that this is going to be secondary data. You didn't just leap out and map it all yourself. You have to say where you got it from. Give credit to the people who were doing and getting the information so that you can use it. An urban transect, we would use an urban transect, wouldn't we? Because you couldn't do the whole valley. You couldn't do the whole of Sheffield or an area in Wigan. You couldn't do that. And you need to be able to assess which is going to be a best size of area to work on. It's manageable. You couldn't do the whole of the valley, and you would get lost off in too many facts. Remember, you're only going to have a certain amount of words that you can use. They've got to count. Every word has got to count. Anything you do remember, anything that you record, any maps that you draw, any photographs you take, any questionnaires you do, is all your primary data. Excuse me. Any maps or photographs that you would get from the library or from a historical association or from any kind of institution would refer as secondary data. It's not going to be yours. Primary is going to be very important. Our transect goes right the way down to the river, and John's going to be using the same line in order to observe and collect different data. So I'm going to be able to give you background and where you can get things from, techniques that you can use so that you can use it as a baseline. If you want photographs of the Ouseburn, there are lots of photographs on the GA website, and you'll be able to get them easily, download them if you want to use them. But I would advise that you use your own photographs, because you can get out there with your phone and click away quite happily. And hopefully the two presentations will dovetail and they'll make a lot of sense. We can't really do face-to-face workshops at the minute, but hopefully as time goes on, we can bring these back into play. All right, so say you want to get a map, and say you want to get a map of Bolton, or say you want to get a map of an area in Tyne and Weir, or you want to be getting one in Falkirk in Scotland. Ordnance Survey and Google Earth we've looked at, but one of the better sites is the National Library of Scotland. Brilliant maps, go back through time. Hopefully your school might have a license for you to use these maps, and you can have one side by side. You can use slides on OS, slides on Google Earth, and you can see what the older map was and what the current map is today. Where would I go to get a map in Newcastle? I'd go to the Central Library. And they're really very nice about getting huge maps out for you to have a look. any archive, especially Discovery Museum archive at Blandford Street in Newcastle, they have a massive area of maps where you can, and a reading room where you can go and look at things. And also you can get maps of your local area, which is the Godfrey edition, but you have to buy those as well. So maps, old maps, are easy for you to get hold of. So here we've got a map which was sourced from the Central Library in Newcastle. And you can see I've oranged in part of a line of the transects, 1861 approximately. Dates on maps are always a bit difficult to establish because they would have taken time to draw. So your 1861 might have taken quite a while. Stepney Street, Stepney Square, Stepney Bank are a result of this, and it's Stepney House. Stepney House in 1861 was a nice area of green, and I will draw your attention to this blank area at the bottom, and at the top you've got two tanneries. Now bear in mind when John's talking that next to our street, our transect, you had tanneries, and the smell from there would be quite interesting. And also you've got the pottery. So in 1861, you don't really have a lot of areas where you had a lot of industry or that showed to be industry. And there at the left-hand side are the Tanner's Arms. So you've had pubs, and there you've got the Brown Jug, and there you've got the Bricklayer's Arms. The water quality would be not very good, no running water. It was healthier to actually drink beer. I know you're probably all cheering at this point, but it was healthier for you to drink beer, and children would drink half beer because the water had been boiled. Cholera, big problem in Newcastle, and it was a killer because of the poor diet and also a lack of medication. And if we think about from 1861 to 1896, not a lot of time, but look at what's happened where you've got lots of housing at the bottom, terraced housing. You've got all sorts of railway works here, slaughterhouses, that would smell nice, tanneries, you have sawmills, you have pottery, and you have lead works, and you have all sorts of heavy industry. Not very nice smelling industry, but all industries which would be, in many respects, just using raw materials. Further down in the valley, there were the Ouseburn works where you had iron, the pottery, and you have the two tanneries linked to the slaughterhouse. Industrial linkage is playing a large part in our transect, because remember that we imported a lot of animals via the quayside, and there's a cattle mart in the centre of town. So your animals would be processed at the slaughterhouse, and then skins would be taken over to the tanneries and put in all sorts of weird and wonderful liquids to scrape and to tan them and to stop them deteriorating. But the linkages think about this, that it's still horse and carts, and that you would have materials taken up and down that street in between local industries where you had links, industrial linkages. And then you would have linkages with what would you do with the rest of the stuff from the tanner as well. Take it down to the mouth of the Ouseburn, meet up with the manure coming out of Newcastle, take it a bit further along into the manure works and the fertilizer works, and all of that would be having chemicals added from Alhusen and Friar's Goose on the other side. Fantastic, ready-made fertilizer. So 1896, the glory days of manufacturing within the Ouseburn, and on our street, you would also have coal being burnt. You would have had smells from the tanneries and from the wood mills and the pottery and the lead works. So we're thinking about burning coal. And where do you get the coal from if you've got no money? You get it from the river, because the river was tidal, the Ouseburn was tidal, and children could go and forage down near the stepping stones or down near the factories and pick coal up and bring it home. So it was an interesting lifestyle, let's put it that way. By 1916, you've tended to find that things had started to move on. 1916, remember, was the middle of the Great War, and the date could be misleading, but you still have lots of terraced houses. You had some works closing down, labour intensive works were closing down. The pottery's gone. Your lead works is still there. You've got a mill, but you also have changes because of the world situation. And of course, you've got two transport routes crossing the valley. So our street is maybe starting to suffer. And by 1942, there's big blank areas where you have less housing. You've got warehouses, you've got an abattoir, no more pottery, excuse me, no more pottery, and you've got warehousing where your mill used to be. Everything is changing because other places were doing it better. So our street is starting to see large changes. By 1951, you had a lot of slum clearance. And as slum clearance came, people moved away. As industries changed, people moved away because there weren't any jobs, there weren't enough jobs. The National Library gives you these lovely side-by-side maps. So you have one on one side, and you can actually, there's a slide which you can use. So you could actually work out what's there today, because it's an aerial, and what was there over 100 years ago. So it's quite a nice little function. And another one where you can see the housing at the bottom. If you look at the battlefield, it's all terraced housing. If you look at it now, you're looking at areas which will be flats, areas where you've got nice green sections. Green wouldn't actually be involved very much on our street at this time. It was very much a built-up area with very little option for green. If you wanted to look at the individual buildings, you can always find out, because you've got two street directories. You've got street directories that you can get in any of the libraries, and it will tell you what's going on. The secondary information can help you explain change. If you looked at the Central Library, the engineers' photographs as to why houses were demolished, you can find them if you ask for a particular location. One of the PowerPoints I've put on is I've chosen a number of buildings on our transect and shown how they changed over time. My techniques are just to add labels and to add arrows and maybe outlines and photographs which have been culled from the local library. And you could show how an individual building changes over time. Why does it change over time? Changing places are important here as well. Use of case studies. Ward street keys can tell you, they'll give you a street address. So for example, we've got Lime Street here, and the actual numbers that you can see there are the numbers of the buildings. So it gives you an idea about what it's like, about what's been happening on the street. So we know what's happened with the buildings, and we know that the industry's changed, and we know that it's possibly outside influences and the fact that the buildings are old, the processes are out of fashion. But what about the people? There must be people living here. And where can you get the information? Right, well, Nomis is up to date. It's 2011 here. It's a website that you can get information in general about an area. So if you wanted biker, for example, you would put biker in on the left-hand side, and it would give you an enormous amount of information. But it can't give you information about individual families and individual domiciles, places where people lived. But Nomis is a very useful area to get information from, what people are doing, how long have they lived there, what the labour supplies are like, how many people live there, residents. what happens if you want to know about individual people? Well, the data for the 1921 census has just been published, came out at the beginning of the year. It's 100 years in between census release because it's all about data protection, and 100 years should just about cover everybody who occurs on this sheet. And it takes quite a long time for you to actually manage to process the information. Each household would have had a census sheet, and you can find these on the Ouseburn Trust's website. There are quite a few years that you can find there, which would be for the Ouseburn. There are lots of history websites, Find My Past, Ancestry, where you can look up information. Libraries are a good place for those to, you can go and find information there. But what does it show you? Well, it shows you, first of all, who's living there, and you've got a family. And I chose this one because it was Cowan. My name's Cowans. I don't come from this area, but I just thought it was appropriate. And they lived on Lime Street. So there were 5 people living in one room. And there's 4 people in the family, but they've also got a lodger. It tells you about your marital status. The gentleman's been widowed, but it also tells you what they were doing. Now, they were working on the quayside. They could walk from the house down to the quayside. Very easy. Children were in school. That's good. And they were all born within the region. But you might also find that within this area, there were people who came from abroad, that there were refugees at the turn of the century. People who were refugees came into the area, people who worked flax, people who journeyed through, all of whom would have been in the census. They all lived in one room, and the room would be small. And that's why often on the photographs that you'll see in an area, the children are always playing outside because the crampness would have been dreadful. And yet again, you get copyright. This bit at the side says copyright. Don't worry too much about that. I wrote to the archives. I got in touch with the archives, and the gentleman was very nice, and he said, you can use the information. There's a letter on the Ouseburn Trust website, which gives us permission to use the census data, which means we're not infringing any kind of copyright. If you're collecting primary data, it's your data, you're collecting it. You have to decide what kind of data you're going to collect, where you're going to collect it from. Are you going to be walking the street? We've walked the street down and back up again. Is there any building which takes your particular interest? Do you want to take that? Is that one of the ways in which you could collect information? Collect the information and then utilize it for what you want to prove, whatever your title of your inquiry is going to be. Can you take photographs? That might be your passion. That might be, it might be really interesting for you to be able to do that. Would you want to do your own sketch diagrams so that you can label it? Do you want to process it on a computer using Photoshop? Do you want to use one of the photograph to sketch programs that you can get on your phone? Anything where you're processing the data that you've collected is good. It's important. Labeling and annotating, including them in your text, titles, good presentation will all collect marks for you, for your personal inquiry. Remember, don't get sidetracked like me. We are recording change. Our street changed dramatically in 100, 150 years. The smelly industry was from processing raw materials, but what's taken its place? Nobody wants those industries anymore. What's taken its place? Is it recreation? Is it fine dining? Is it entertainment? Street festivals? What about housing? Who lives there now? people still live in public houses. The manager will have a flat at the top. They live in 36 Lime Street. There are apartments at the top. But on our street, the houses don't butt onto the street. They're found behind. And a lot of them are student accommodation. And why are students living near to our street? Think about that. Obviously, it's a entertaining area, but it's also very close to the actual city where the universities are. So that's something that you can think about. We don't make pottery anymore, but we make meals. We have stables where you can take your children to look at horses. And especially one area I'm going to look at the bottom of the street is Ouseburn Farm. And that's an area which gives back to the community as opposed to the lead works, which took things away. And think about the transport on the street. Could you create a timeline? Could you create a timeline to show how it's changed and then what's happened at the end of it? Do you want to be thinking about the bridges? Because who's going to drive down a very steep bank and up another steep bank at the other side when you can just get on a train, or you can send goods by a train across the valley itself? So there are 3 big bridges across the river, across the valley, and that must have affected the way in which the valley was used. The other thing, of course, is that the Roman wall went through the valley, and there is quite a lot of interest in archaeological evidence which shows where the wall went down into the valley itself and up the other side. So that's another thing that people are interested in for our street, because it was potentially the route of a Roman wall. Our theme has talked about the idea of change and smellies and outdated processes. You could have used sketches, you could have used photographs, you could use photographs side by side. So what about something like this? I took the photograph, this is the mouth of the river, and then because it just escaped me, Photoshop, on the left-hand side, I had to talk to John Hipkin, who very kindly did me a Photoshop outline. That's using technology. You could do it yourself, of course, and then annotate it, whatever you feel happiest doing. But obviously, if you have a photograph and you want to annotate it, and this is silly, you wouldn't do it like that. You would do it with nice straight arrows with enough space around. This is all about presentation, how you present your information. Is it relevant? Is it answering the question that you started with? So it's nice to think that you would be given credit for annotation and the good use of photographs. We've got one of the area on the hub. It's an outline, there's a photograph to go with it. So you could put arrows with apartments at the top, with the hub. And this used in 1976, this was seen as a warehouse in black and white. And you've got the car park where, in theory, the big wheel's going to go. Can't imagine it would have stood up to the winds that were going recently, but we haven't heard very much of the big wheel currently. And this is the area where you've got the fishermen, and this is the area where you've got, it's a water treatment plant. So we are seeing plans for lots more houses at the mouth of the river, but not on the banks, Stepney Bank, Stepney Street. There is no room, and there's just not enough flat land. We've talked about change in function, and we've talked about the idea of a change from secondary to tertiary and quaternary industrial groups, if you still use those words. There are all sorts of different ways in which it's being expanded, but there are all sorts of areas where you can get beer, entertainment, live music, and lots of small businesses. Our street has had to adapt. And one of the biggest adaptations has been the Ouseburn farm at the bottom, and this is where the concept of community. Are we looking at a cultural village in the Ouseburn Valley? But we're also looking at community giving back. Originally, the farm was called the Biker City Farm, and it was an area where inner city children could go, which is a bit of a label, but where children could go and you could cuddle rabbits and you could go and watch sheep and you could look at pigs and you could see hamsters. And it was nice to go and look out at these animals in the farm itself. And you could visit, and there were classrooms and toilets, etc. Unfortunately, the bit that didn't give back to the community, or it did give back to the community, it wasn't very nice. The lead works, which had been there for so long, polluted the land seriously, so much so that it was shut down and the topsoil had to be taken away, hence the digger and the dumper truck. So the building existed, but the land it was built on was unacceptable. So the land was cleared and the old engine works was still left there as a little historical memento. And you ended up with the farm itself here, with cleared land at the side. Obviously, they've started already laying out the areas where they were going to grow things. This area was going to house animals. They'd already started thinking about that, and the land was safe for you to be able to use. It works within the community and it gives back, because for a long time you had people, young people, who can go and get experience working in the kitchen, helping, making things, baking. Students who can go down into the workshops underneath, who can help with the children when they come in and they do experiments with plants, for example. The Ouseburn was important in the Second World War because it was an area where you had not bombing, but you did have some bombing in the area. And of course, students come down from primary schools into the area to go down the historical Victoria Tunnel and learn about what it was like during the Second World War. The farm provides schoolrooms, facilities for the students, for the children, to listen to people, to go out and find out about it, and to also do quite a lot of work, which is field work, which is important, getting them out. The farm is an eco building, and that's always something which is useful. I think wherever you live, you're always going to be able to find sustainable buildings. And this one in particular was built, possibly thinking about how badly polluted the area was. It was built to have all sorts of different things embedded in it, where you had the idea of lots of different ability to maintain heating, to use, grey water, where you could have a roof which was a green roof, which would keep the building's temperatures, and the building was actually lifted off the ground in order to keep insulation. They put a green roof on, which was sedum, sedum covered, and sedum absorbs moisture, and obviously there's a membrane underneath to stop it going through into the building, but the sedum maintains insulation in the top of the building. The air is trapped, so you can actually keep the building warmer than it would have been. And also you raise the building up off the ground and you pack the basement with stones and air. And you have animals, which you can go and see, and you have gardens, which you can walk through, and you have plants and materials which you're actually growing. And it's a green oasis, very different to what it would have been when it was a lead works. What does it provide? Well, there's a cafe, there's the build of the farm itself. You've got areas where you've got rooms. Children can go and look at the animals. You've got schoolrooms, gardens, vegetables. Another thing which it would provide is the idea of summer schools, almost, during the holidays, where the children can go down and find out about the valley itself, and also about growing crops and growing plants and looking after the animals. So the farm shows change. It's a changing location. Can you think of any other areas in your area where change has been for the better, and also where it's aware of the environment? Looking at how the sites have changed, think about what closed, why it closed, and why you had gradual decay. And you've got service industries, and you've got artists, and you've got venues where you've got festivals. All of these things are going to affect your senses, your sensory smell areas for the valley. What would it have been like? What it is like now? It's changed. Has it rebranded? Are the businesses which you find on our street reflecting what's happening in business today? Do you find that the services, for example, Northern Print, there's the architects, there are areas where you've got the woods, for example, you've got offices, you've got areas on the street which make cakes, which are delicious. And you've got areas where people take photographs, you've got pop-up restaurants. You have also quite a number of mechanics. You have garages, and you have high-tech little industries, small businesses along the street. In the last 2 years, you've seen COVID. You've known what COVID's been doing, and it's possibly been shutting down quite a lot of businesses which simply haven't survived. So considering what it was like and what it is now, could you see, and this could happen anywhere, Southport, Liverpool, Toxteth, anywhere, where businesses have actually had to close down because a direct result of a pandemic which was called COVID-19. How have they reacted? Have they managed to survive? And that's maybe something, are they small brands? Are they a brand? Are they just small family businesses? Are you going to be looking at change in that situation itself? The environment's important as well, because you might well find that the streets, you have organisations like the Ouseburn Trust who are interested in making sure that the streets are safe. Because going down Stepney Bank around a dead corner, it can be quite difficult to see if there's traffic coming. And Ouseburn Futures work in the valley itself to try and improve the streets and how people actually can get around. Rebranding calls also for things like new logos. You've got Stepney Bank stables there with hoof prints, and you've got Northern Print with a fingerprint on it. So we're looking at brand advertising, which you can associate with the valley itself. So, do you want to use a questionnaire? Well, you could do, because you can find out what people think of the valley now, or about how the facilities on the valley are creating more people to go down there. Would you want to collect information as a group and or use the same data once you've swapped it? Do you want to have different themes? Sometimes I think that maybe it's better if you do it yourself, as opposed to sending the email with a questionnaire on it to some overworked secretary, poor thing, who simply doesn't have time to send the results back. At least if you did it, if you could do it yourself, if you did it yourself, you have that data there and you're not waiting, and you start processing straight away. There could be some places that you would like to get the data back from, and they may well send it back, but it could be that you're waiting some time for it, and then what's going to happen then? You're behind, you can't get it sorted, you can't get it swapped, and if you were acting as a group, is that potentially going to be better for you? But again, as with all things, personal safety is going to be your own best friend. So finally, our streets changed over time. Shift away from heavy material, street air quality. One last question for you. If you looked at our street, it was not necessarily dominated by housing, but there was a lot of housing there. And if it doesn't have housing, why not? If there aren't the jobs there, are people going to want to live next to the jobs? Are they going to want to live somewhere else? Do they want to live at St. Peter's Basin, for example? And can you explain why the economic activity is as it is today? What limitations actually have been put on the buildings and the businesses here? Is it lack of space? Because a lot of the buildings butt straight onto the road, and therefore there isn't a great deal of space for development behind. So there you have it. Look on the website. There's lots of information there. And this PowerPoint will be there for you to use as well, along with a couple of others. And I'm going to hand over to John now, because he's got a really interesting bit to talk to you now. Right. Oh.
Hello, it's John Smith here. One quick point to make first of all. In her talk, Liz made several references to material available on the website. In fact, she's got some brilliant sets of photos of buildings through time all the way down Stepney Bank. They really are, they're a superb mixture of old photos, fairly recent photos, and modern photos that she's taken herself. And to get hold of these, request them from ga-tyneweir@gmail.com, and you'll be sent those copies of those photographs. While we're in passing, if there's anything else you need from either Liz or me, do please write to us at ga-tyneweir, and we will do what we can to either support you or provide extra resources, talk to teachers, even talk to groups of students, and we will help you in this area in any way we can. So please get in touch with us if you need us. I'm going to go through primary data collection techniques that you could develop for our street through time. Now, you could develop those in this area, in our Ouseburn area, or as Liz kept saying, in really many areas in the country. I've already done some work in North Tyneside on the Fish Quay, using a lot of the techniques I'm going to be talking about here. And I'm also planning to do some work with some people up in Bladen, in the Bladen Burn. Bladen Burn's another river that runs into the Tyne. It's a South Bank tributary, and it's further upstream, but it's got a very interesting industrial history. Not so much interesting present day change, but it's almost an example of rewilding rather than new development. So these techniques can be applied in many different places. Anyway, I thought Liz's work was brilliant. And if you look at those pictures that I've just mentioned, they're even more brilliant. I can't do anything like as dramatic or as attractive as what she did, but maybe that's not my job. I think my job is to give you techniques that you can develop. I don't want to present them in anything like a finished way, because I want you to take them on and use them. Now, Liz's work, I think, has got two great possibilities. You can use it as a case study. It's superb on a small place. Whatever small place studies you have in your spec, you can take this and really look at change over time and present day geography of that area, and how the past's affected the present, how the present is affected by local conditions and national conditions, international conditions, and so on. And it's also a superb case study for urban development and change, industrial development and change. So used as a case study. Also, it can be the basis of a fieldwork study. And that's what I'm going to try to develop here. Now, Liz gave you a lot of source of secondary data. Mine are primary techniques. And because they're primary, they're for you to develop to suit your topic. So I've not given you finished, really neat ideas. I've given you starting points for you to develop and, develop them as you wish. And remember, it's your own personal development that gets your marks. And in the long run, it's marks that we're talking about. My first technique, Liz kept hinting at this, I think you can do smelly maps. I think a smelly map would be wonderful. Think about what our street was like in the past. And then when you think about it, try not to think about it. And then go on to look at what our streets like now, what it smells like now. Now, the slide I'm going to show you was developed by a joint group from Liverpool and Barcelona University Geography departments. As far as I know, it's been handed around a bit, but I think that's where it came from. But you need to develop it further if we're to use it here. It looks lovely. It is a Smelly Disc, and it's a way of breaking down the smells you can smell in an area into lots of different categories. You see in the central ring, they have food smells, waste smells, emission smells, and so on. And then they break each of those down. So food is breaking food and beverages and barbecue. They break food and beverages into baked and fruity smells, and barbecue into BBQ and barbecue. Now, I'm beginning to get really concerned in that outer ring. Are those the only two smells that you can smell of food and beverages? What about Indian and Chinese? And what about beer and breweries? And what about pizza shops? And what about, just the general smell you get walking past a restaurant? And they've got the barbecue. And they break that down into BBQ and barbecue. Quite frankly, I've no idea what that means. Let's just have a look at it in a bit more detail. Waste breaks down to garbage, excrement, and something else. Garbage into trash and waste. Are you clear what the difference is between trash and waste? Excrement. Well, let's leave it there. Let's move on. I don't think, nice though it looks, that disc is ideal for our purposes. So what I started to do was to look at other ways of doing a Smelly Map survey. I suggested that you draw up a table like this. At the top, you put location, date, time of doing your study. And you walk down the street and you stop at various places. And you stand for a couple of minutes and you breathe deeply and you smell. And are the smells, are they pleasant or unpleasant? Can you grade them on that 1 to 10 basis? Mild and potent. Is it a very mild smell or is it a very strong smell? Is it localized? Is it a smell that's specific to a very small area, or is it widespread? And then I think you've got to go into details of the spread of the smell. As you walk down the street, how long does that smell last? And does it get stronger or weaker? And so on your recording map, maybe you can find some way of showing the core of the smell and how the smell spreads out from that core. Maybe it's the back door of a pizza cafe. And obviously by the back door, you'll have a very strong smell of baking dough. As you move up or down the street, the smell will get stronger or weaker. Partly depend on wind direction. It'll partly depend on what other smells are around in the area and so on. But as you're walking around the area, try to trace that smell. Try to show on your map the sort of contours of the smell. You'll have to sketch them in. Obviously, this is going to be a rough bit of a sketch, but do your best to show core smells and slight smells, and try to show where two smells meet, you know, where the pizza place, the smells from that meet the smells from the microbrewery a little bit further down the street. And then where the smells from the microbrewery meet the smells of stale beer coming from the pub, from the bottle bank outside, or whatever. But the point is, you develop your own smelly maps. You develop your way of recording it. You make it relevant to your study. Now, you can do that as primary data today or tomorrow, or whenever you go out and do your fieldwork. I think it also becomes primary data if you use the map for 1861 or 1896 and study the buildings that were there, the slaughterhouse, the tannery, the pottery works, the place with the big mill chimney with the smoke coming out. And at each of those on your map, you try to imagine whether the smells were pleasant or unpleasant, mild or potent, and you certainly get some potent smells in 1896, whether they were localized or widespread, where they clashed and where they mingled, and so on. I don't know if you noticed on some of the maps that Liz showed, there were urinals or public toilets down by the Ouseburn. They might have had their own fairly characteristic smells. So you think about that way of recording smell, present and future, present and past. And it's an important geographical study to give you a sense of place on your fieldwork. Now, I use 10 figures on there, a scale from 1 to 10. Can you really, are your noses sensitive enough to differentiate between 10 different degrees of pleasant and unpleasant smell, or mild and potent? Should you perhaps just use 5 steps? Well, you decide. You justify your choice. You gain the marks. You say, it was suggested that we use this. When I went out in the field, I thought, I'll do it this way. I did it this way because. And you're criticizing and you're showing how you develop your ideas. Credit. Now, this is when I started to develop my list. I used that circular diagram as my basis. But I thought for food, they had baked and fruity and barbecue. I put curried, fried, I'd put pizza in, I'd put general restaurant smells, whatever. I would develop it as I went along. And if when I was walking around, I found some kind of food smell that I hadn't expected, I would add it in. It may well be that somebody set up a West Indian street food stall. Well, I'd have to write that in, wouldn't I? And you would have to write it in as you're doing your survey. For waste, I've got garbage, excrement, and sewage. I wonder if the excrement, I would subdivide it into dog, horse, hopefully not human. I don't know. I might be able to smell sewage down by the river. I don't know. But this study will be your study, and you would develop your list as you were doing it. For the tobacco, they had on that big circle cigarette smoke and cigar smoke. I'd have to walk a long way around Newcastle until I came to a place where cigar smoke was strong. I might have fresh cigarette smoke, I might have stale cigarettes, but vapes, that'd be the thing that I would really expect to find. And then in some parts of the city, I would find hubbly bubbly shops with people smoking the hubble bubble pipes with all sorts of different scents in them. And if I can find them in parts of Newcastle, there are certainly cities in the country where I could find a lot more of them. Under industry, they had coal and chemicals, but I'm sure there might be other kinds of industrial smell, particularly with the car factory, the car repair shops and so on around the Ouseburn. About nature, soil, trees, flowers, grass. Again, you develop it as you feel the need. On the big diagram, for nature, they had skunks. Now, I have never seen a skunk in Newcastle. I've never seen a skunk in Northumberland. I've never seen a skunk in anywhere in the UK. I've never seen a skunk anywhere. I don't know how they managed to get skunk in on their smells of nature. So again, you adapt it for things that you think you might find, and then adapt it further for things that you do find. It's your work, you develop it, you gain marks. Have a look for ideas in that again, but don't rely on it. Rely on yourselves. You've also got to decide on your own sampling technique. When you're doing your Smelly Map, if you're doing your Smelly Map or whatever map you're doing, you know what the transect is going to be. Do you decide beforehand, I'm going to take my readings every 20 meters, every 50 meters? Am I going to choose some random way of sampling along that transect line? Am I going to do a random sample across a wider area than the sample line? You might decide to choose your points in advance. Or you might say, I'm going to wait till the day. I'm going to wait till I'm actually out in the field and then do my sample. So I'll do my sample along the transect line at regular intervals. Or I'll do my points at points of particular interest. So when I smell a smell, I'll stop. And every time I smell a change of smell, I'll stop again. Will I stick very directly to my transect line, or will I move away from the transect line a bit? Supposing I smelt a pizza smell, but I couldn't see the pizza shop, but I could see a street going off to the right, and I think I'll go along that street to the right as needed, just to see where the pizza smell's coming from, or whatever smell it is. So I'm all in favor of choosing your sample on the day for something like this, and being opportunistic and doing what seems useful to you. But whatever sampling technique you decide on, you justify it. And I know I keep saying this, but it's got to be in the back of your mind. A good justification of your technique is going to gain you marks. Of course, you're enjoying doing it. Of course, you're proud of your work, but still, you've got to get the good marks. So that's the Smelly Maps. Now, what about doing security maps? When you're in this place, do you feel safe? Do you think you'd feel different if you were there at night? Do you think you'd feel different if you were? Do you think it'd be different for girls or boys? Do you think it'd be different for big old men or small, delicate ladies? I often think that as a big man, I'm a challenge to people. I might challenge them, whereas smaller people and more delicate people might be able to get by, might be able to smile and get by. I don't know. There are different kinds of safety, aren't there? It applies different to all sorts of people. The safety from people, the safety from traffic, safety from the environment. How safe is the environment, in the actual physical environment, in going down this street in the Ouseburn, or going down whichever street you choose? Are the pavements safe? Are the buildings safe? Because in an area with old buildings, it may well be quite dangerous, especially in storms like we've been having at this February. Is safety affected by lightning? By lighting, street lighting? Is safety affected by visibility and sight lines? That's a technique that the police use and planners use. If there are places in a building or around a building that are completely hidden from view, so nobody can see you, that's a place for rogues to hang out and not be seen, and to be able to sneak up and do their mugging or do their whatever evil intents they have. Does the state of care of the environment affect safety? Can you see evidence of closed circuit television cameras, which again are going to affect safety? So you could go around an area and map safety and security, and safety and security at different times for different types of people on different occasions. I came across this. Somebody had suggested this as a way of recording your data. This place is always unsafe. Color red. Sometimes unsafe. Color orange. I don't know this place. Well, what are you doing your field work there for? You know, you're knowing it because of your field work. Mostly safe, always safe. That's a fine, you know, that's a very reasonable breakdown. I would say this place is always unsafe. Color it red. Sorry, that's the same one. That's one idea I found. Does it work here? I'm not sure about the word always. Does it mean you have to keep going back at different times? Might this be better? This place feels very unsafe. So that's saying it feels very unsafe when I was there. That was at one time. Or it feels a bit unsafe. Or it feels average. And I think you'll probably find quite a lot that feel average. Or it feels pretty safe. Or it feels completely safe. I think that's an easier way of gathering data than the always, never, or always, rarely. I also hope you notice that I've used a better color spectrum. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue. They got their progression of colors a little bit mixed up on the previous one. I'm more in line with the spectrum. I'm getting into a rainbow coloring. So we've had smell, we've had safety, noisy maps. You can think about the noise that there might have been in that street in the past. 1861 and 1894. Think of the noise then. Think of the cattle being led to the slaughterhouse. Think of the coal being shoveled into the furnaces for the factory chimneys. Think of the horses going up and down the street. So think of what it might be like in the past and draw a noisy map for that, and then collect data on what it's like now. And you can think about good noise and bad noise, attractive noise and ugly noise. You think about constant noise and short-term noise. Now, to measure your noise, you can use your own ears and your own impressions. It's interesting to use a decibel meter, and for a smartphone, you can quite easily get a noise meter app. they say at the time that loudness is measured, record the source of the noise if you can. There are lots of different kinds of noise that you might come across, often different noises clashing. So the loudness, the direction that the noise is coming from, the source, if you can find it. This person who I pinched this idea from said it's very useful for making comparisons between beach resorts and rural coastal strips, town versus urban fringe, rural versus remote rural, day against night. But here we can have top of the bank against bottom of the bank, and close to the river against far from the river, and so on. You develop this for your own area and to test your own interests. You may well want to compare the noise area in residential areas with the noise level in the more industrial and commercial areas. Now, I stole the next slide, and it was one way of presenting data from noise transect. And it was from a fairly high level academic presentation, so don't panic. Don't think that the exam boards are expecting you to do maps quite as good as this. But what happened here? The person went along that transect, started at the bottom of the page, and went round in a big loop. You can see the contours of the land that they went over. And if you see the contours on the left-hand side of the map, when they're coming back down from the top of the map, down the left-hand side, they're actually walking on the top of a hill, top of a ridge. You see that from the contours. When they were going, they were walking on the foot of that ridge. At each of their recording points, they use their decibel meter to record the noise level. Then they put those noise levels on the map. They put the number of decibels on the map at each place. And then they must have noticed that along the starter contour, along the start of their map, they came to a big area where the decibel meter read less than 45. So for all that area, they assumed that it was below 45 and they could shade it green. And then as they moved further north or further up the map, it got higher. It got between 45 and 50. So they shaded that yellow. And then they came into an orange bit, 50 to 55, then darker orange. Then they came into the red, but they came into the red that was over 60 when they were along the top of the ridge, and obviously they could hear noise coming up from the left-hand side of the map. There was something down there that was creating a lot of noise. In actual fact, it was a major road running down there. And the major road, it made a lot of noise on that side of the hill. But once you got over the top of the hill, the noise fell off very considerably. The road on the other side of the transect area was a much more minor road. So having got all those recordings, below 45 in one part of it and over 60 in another part of it, they then estimated in the noise contours and shaded the map to go with it. Now, I don't know how they got all their readings on that estate to the top right or to the other side of the road to the top left. They seem a bit bitty, but you could draw a contour map something like that. I think that looks excellent. It looks quite frightening and intimidating. When you look into it in detail, maybe it's not quite so intimidating. Maybe you could do something like that in your area. But this was an area with a very clear distinction between to the one side of the hill, the other side of the hill. But it's something to think about, something to aim for, possibly. Now, I'm going to look at a different set of techniques, and there's a technique being developed called placemaking, which is a way of doing a qualitative study of a place. It was developed by people at the Field Studies Council, and it was to be used either by students to study an area or by people who live in an area to try to get their own feeling for the area and to think about how they could possibly develop the area better. It could be parish councils who did this, or it could be housing associations who did it. Or it could be people who lived around a school who did it, to try to think about how their area could be developed. So for placemaking techniques, the Field Studies Council developed a way of measuring, a way of people going out and finding out, is this a special place? Is it a well-connected, accessible and welcoming place? Is it a safe and pleasant place? These are the kind of questions that you can ask. And they said, you can either go around the place and answer these questions for yourself, or you can make these a basis of a questionnaire to go around and ask other people. So you can find out just exactly what the place is like. And having found out what the place is like and what you think it's like, or what its inhabitants think it's like, you can then suggest how it can be made more special, more accessible and welcoming, safer and pleasanter. And then they also got this very large, much bigger set of questions about making a planet-friendly place, with a whole series of questions to ask about planet friendliness. Now, I like this. I think you could really do this in the Ouseburn. Just exactly what is being done and what could be done to make the Ouseburn planet friendly. Now, some of these questions you could answer very easily. Some of the questions would be a lot more difficult. But they do form the basis for you to go out and do a study of aspects of that area, either of our one particular street or the Ouseburn as a whole, or whichever area it is you're studying. It needs a lot of careful thought. It needs a lot of careful planning. You need to find out exactly how you're going to get your information. But this placemaking is a technique that's developing quite a lot in geography circles. So I'm just going to go through some more ideas very quickly. You could do a litter map survey as part of any one of these things, any one of these things, you know, a study of the street or a study of placemaking. A litter map survey, map individual items. How many bits of litter can you find along a street? Where are the very littery places and where are the unlittery places? So you just map and count. You can classify the litter. Is it personal? You know, sweetie wrapper, commercial, has it got the name of some firm on? Is it builder's waste? You know, a cement sack they've been using and it's blown away and they've not bothered to pick it up. Is it stuff from particular shops and businesses? Some shops put their name on everything they produce, like McDonald's, like Colonel Sanders. They advertise where the litters come from, and again, you could look at that. How far around a business does its actual litter litter area spread. Where's the core litter area and the peripheral litter area from the particular shop? Does the litter look as though it's recent or long term? Sometimes the litter's really caught up in the grass. You know, the grass has grown and it's tying down the beer cans and the Costa coffee cups and so on. Or sometimes it's just blowing around on the pavement. It looks like it's not been there long. It may well be that the McDonald's sends out one of its staff to clear up at the end of every day. So all the litter around one particular shop is short term, and you think, yeah, that shop's doing its best with some fairly unruly customers. Is the litter static, just lying there? Is it wind blown, being blown about? Has it been blown there, washed there by water? And then you can look at it, is it biodegradable, plastic, metal, rubber, and so on. You can do all sorts of things developing a litter survey as part of a bigger survey. Big question, when you're doing your litter survey, do you take a bag along and clear it up? That's up to you and your conscience. But I bet if you showed a picture of your bag of litter that you collect at the end of it, put that in your study, you gain an extra point. Well, the person who was marking it would like you. It put them in a good mood for you. You've got to keep thinking about that. I like the idea of doing a graffiti map survey. You can look at slogans, tags, personal comments, insults, political statements, pictures, cartoons. You might even find a Banksy. Are the graffitis positive or negative? Do you think they benefit the area or detract from it? Your opinions are one thing. You might ask people in the area whether they find it positive or negative. Is the graffiti welcoming or threatening? Now, I know there are some areas where, well, I remember when I first moved to Newcastle, there were a lot of graffitis around the edge of the area where I used to live that said Kenton Boot Boys or KBBBs, Kenton Bank Boot Boys, which were meant to be threatening. I didn't feel they were, but they weren't welcoming. Can graffiti be funny? Can it be political? Is it recent or old? I remember I've been to Barcelona a couple of times, and some of the graffiti there is really intensely political. There's a part of Barcelona with a lot of anarchist squatters in there, and some of the graffiti that the squatters have done in that area is, well, I think it's art, but it's very political art. It can be rude art. It can be quite threatening art. It can be funny, but it's exciting. Now, just outside the Ouseburn, there's an area, some of you may know the biscuit factory, which was a biscuit factory and is now an art gallery. But close to the biscuit factory, there's also an old industrial premises that's been taken over as the biscuit box. And in the biscuit box, it's been set up for lots of small scale art studios. And around the back of the biscuit box, there's a great big wall, a blank wall, which has been divided up into sections for graffiti. And I think they're superb, some of those graffitis. I think they really make a very boring wall interesting. I'm an old man though. I'm not into graffiti anyway, but I bet some of you could make a really good do of doing a graffiti survey in an area and trying to work out how it contributes to the environment in all these ways. I've suggested that you look at neighbourhood care survey or neighbourhood environmental study of a neighbourhood. And in a neighbourhood, you might look at the amount of public open space, public built up space, where it's actually built up but people are allowed in, private open space, private commercial space where people aren't allowed in, or they're only allowed in under very strict circumstances. Shopping centres are private commercial space where certain people would be most discouraged from going in. Roads and pavements, how are they cared for? How are they used? How are they accessible? Then marginal spaces, the spaces in between buildings that often seem like no man's land. Are they looked after, or are they just places where litter blows and accumulates and nobody cares for? These are all things to look at, possibly. Even in an urban area, you can do studies of vegetation, just exactly what is there. Or you can do history evidence map surveys. Is the area strongly influenced by the history, or is it completely modern, completely new? But it's your individual work. I've tried to throw out some ideas of collecting primary evidence. It depends on what you choose as your topic, but choose your topic. When you're choosing your topic, think about how you're going to collect your evidence. And if you can't think of ways of collecting evidence for your topic, then don't do it. Change your topic. Maybe not a lot, but change it. Develop these ideas or something like these, or use your own ideas. And I think I've got to finish with this final thing. Think back to the first half of this talk. Think back to what Liz did. If you choose carefully and well, fieldwork can be really good fun. Liz has put so much time and effort into preparing that talk and into preparing the sets of slides that are available on the Tyne GA website. It's been a labour of love for her, and it's been a labour of love for me looking through it. It's wonderful stuff. So again, learning from Liz, if you really care and commit yourself, you could produce something that you could feel really proud of. And I hope you do. I hope you have a very careful think about place and about geography and about techniques and about what you're capable of doing and how you're capable of presenting it, and come up with something that you can feel really proud of at the end of doing it. So thank you very much. Good luck with that. And if you need any help, do call on the GA Tyne Weir, and we'll see what we can do to help you. Thank you. Bye.
Well, many thanks to both Liz and John for those wonderful presentations. I really hope that they can be of use to teachers and students who are embarking on fieldwork after, in some cases, quite a long break from being out in the field and collecting data. That was really enjoyable. And if there are any questions, please do send them to us at gatyneweir@gmail.com. That comes through to me, and I can communicate with Liz and John where necessary with your questions. I have copies of their presentations. If you would like a PDF of them, then just drop me a line and I can email them out to you. You can also get in touch with us on social media. All of the details are up there, and there are lots of other useful talks on a variety of subjects, particularly aimed at A-level geography, but also some GCSE material and some for teachers as well, all on our YouTube channel, and that's the name of it there. So many thanks to Liz and John, and I hope you enjoy watching and re-watching the material, and that it's useful to you.